Going. So let's get started. And we're missing a couple of people tonight. There's a couple of people are going to be here that are running late. So I'm going to call the November 14th, 2023 Lee County Charter Review Commission meeting to order. And let's all stand for the pledge. Randy, you want to?
Sure. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I forgot we now have two Randys.
It's going to be confusing.
It will be confusing. But before we go any further, let me welcome Randy Chris as a new member to the Lee County Charter Review Commission.
Is that why the cookies are over here?
Wait a minute. I lobbied for shrimp and or sandwiches. We ended up with cookies. Sorry, guys. But Andrea, that's all she'd give us. All right, so let's start with public comment. I do have a couple cards here. Anybody else? You want to start? Start with Maribel and we'll pass them down. We have 3 or 5. 5 minutes we have for speaking.
Randy, Chris said I could have.
Yes, I did. I'm sorry. I didn't know the rules.
Randy doesn't control.
Are you ready?
Okay, again, thank you. My name is Cecil Pendergrass, Lee County Commissioner. I'm here on behalf of myself tonight. I want to give you guys some more information. Again, thank you again for your service. Thank you for everything you're doing and what you're having to deal with here. I just wanted to point out a couple of things. This here, I handed out a map, and this is a current issue in Lee County. And it has something to do with what we've been talking about, this annexation issue. But let me be crystal clear, because some people are confused. Somebody earlier said my issue with the annexation. I do not support the original draft that was written and you guys were given. That was drafted by the county attorney office that I was here that night and I presented because we, the Board of County Commissioners, gave direction to the county staff to look at some things we could do. It was given to you as a task to maybe come up with some different language to address it. I know Richard Aikens sent something out there. I'm not sure. Maybe I had only a chance to review it one time. But this here is a perfect example of what we're dealing with countywide. My goal is to have this discussion is so in the future, tomorrow, next year, 5, 10, 20, 30 years from now, as Lee County continues to grow and redevelops, we do it right. And that's doing it right for the citizens. So a perfect example, this map here you have kind of highlighted two areas. You have the Hyatt Regency on the left side of the map, and you have US 41. This is a 1-mile road called Coconut Road. I think everybody here knows where it is. Great place to stay, the Hyatt Regency. It's a great resort here. It's a great asset to Lee County and Bonita Springs and Estero. Has some beautiful communities on the south side. You have the Colony with billions of dollars worth of tax-based homes in there. Now currently being built along the shoreline. You have the Ritz-Carlton residences coming in there. Skyscraping towers of residences coming in there. But the road currently is owned by the Village of Estero, Bonita Springs, and Lee County. 1-mile road. So Lee County owns 9% of it. There's a legend there that shows you on the left. Lee County Road, I believe it's blue. So it's backed by the hotel. The rest of the road coming in from 41 is Bonita Springs or Estero. So when we have citizens that have concerns about pedestrian safety, beautification, improvements, when we talk about it at MPO, we talk about it internally with staff, it's like herding cats, trying to get a cities, county together to address 1-mile road. So as you drive through this beautiful area to get to this hotel or these future residences, it should look a little bit different. It should be a little bit safer. It should have more turn lanes. There's some right-of-way in the north side of the property that could be bought. The question is, so when I brought it before to the different cities, one city says, we get the impact fee money, but we're not going to spend it on that road because this city does this, Bonita Beach Road. Then the other city says, well, we're not going to do it because of this. And Lee County says we're 9% of it. Now, personally, I wish that one or two of the agencies, the city governments, would either vacate it and give it all to the county, let us do the road one project, or one city takes the whole road over It says, we'll take over the road and do it the right way, like the village started did with Estero Parkway. After they became a village, they took over Estero Parkway, they did beautification, did sidewalks on both sides of the road. So things like this happen, is currently happening today. And that's why this discussion about voluntary annexation, because there's nobody being held responsible. And after it's done, then we as the citizens have to, and the government then has to try to fix it. So if you went in the colony and bought a $3 million house, you come out, you see that entrance, you're like, oh, it's beautiful, but look what the drive-through from 41. If you go on the Ritz-Carlton resident, or if you're here visiting at the Hyatt Regency, you should see a difference. It should be like a transformation going from one point to another. As you drive through Lee County, it should all look the same. So that's all I'm just want to point out to you guys. Again, this whole thing with the annexation thing, the way it's written was not my proposal. It was proposed by the county staff under their direction. We were asking them to come up with something to only give you a starting point to get to another point where we don't have this happen in the future, because we're all going to be living here for a long time. And I just like to say, in the future, 10 years from now, I'd like to look back and say, at least I tried to do something to make this, area better throughout the county, because we're going to see this in Lee County, we're going to see this in Cape Coral, we're going to see this in Norfolk Myers as annexations continue to happen. They will continue to happen. We hope they do. I support the city's home rule.
30
We've
seconds.
been very vocal with the cities, and I understand their concerns, but I support the home rule, but I also think this is important to them. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Andrew, you missed the whole thing. So again, like I said, the whole thing was, I didn't support the original annexation. I'll make sure Andrew hears that so the message gets back, because a certain person's been researching that the last 36 hours a lot. But anyway, this is originally done was because of things like this. So we don't have these pockets like this happen again in the county, like Coconut Road. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Welcome, Andrew.
Thanks, sir.
Next on the list is Bill Deal.
Good afternoon. My name is Bill Diley, and I'm the Vice President of the Greater Pine Island Water Association. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity.
You talk more into the mic.
To the mic. All right, start the clock again. I'm here on behalf of the Pine Island Water Association, speaking in favor of an amendment that would bring more order and dialogue to the process of annexations. Pine Island Water Association was incorporated in 1964. It's a child of the county. The county gave the association a franchise to put water in a certain geographical area, mostly Pine Island, Matlacha, and a little bit of the mainland. We're a not-for-profit co-op, and all our members are customers, and all our customers are members. There's about 7,000 of them presently. We have, over the years, had our franchise area attacked. The first one that comes to mind is 2002, where Jeff Kottkamp sponsored a legislative act to annex certain areas by special act of the legislature. It got through, it was on the governor's desk to be signed, and people complained enough to get Kottkamp to change his mind. He told the governor that he was withdrawing his support of it and asked the governor to veto it, which he did. Back just last year, there was another annexation attempt by special act that didn't get to the legislature because the people that live there found out about it and lobbied against it. I personally rang doorbells in some of the areas, and this area to be annexed went all the way up from Matlacha to Pine Island up to Pindella. Most of the people I spoke to had no idea that this was going on. They're just completely in the dark. I think this process of going before the county will bring a lot of visibility to what's going on that the average citizen doesn't have, and the county, by reviewing things, will put a process in place rather than haphazard annexations. Recently, we had some of our area annexed. It was on the corner of Burnt Store, where it changes into Veterans on Pine Island Road. We had put in a pump station to service Sandoval, and Sandoval got annexed. So business planning and expenditures have to have an orderly process, and I think this proposal will add to that. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Next speaker, Mike, and I'm not going to try.
There's just one stapled copy per person.
Yeah, they are. And slippery. Okay. Mike.
Thank you. I'm grateful for the opportunity to make this public comment. I'm also thankful for the work of the Charter Commission members. I apologize for reading from a script. I'm just trying to maximize the 5 minutes. My name is Mikesme Alkakis, and I'm the General Manager of the Greater Pine Island Water Association and a board-certified professional engineer in the state of Florida. Our water association services Pine Island, Matlacha, and some of the mainland. I'm here to support Pendergrass's amendment on voluntary annexation. I also agree with and support the fire departments who believe the amendment is necessary. This amendment also affects our water district. My public comment will be about 4 things: property rights, the Lee County Land Development Code, the annexation workaround to the Lee County Land Development Code, and finally, a brief summary of some of the Florida statutes regarding the subject. So I've heard many of the Charter Commission members express their support for property rights, and I also am concerned about property rights. But whose property rights are we discussing exactly? The problem is all the property owners in Lee County have rights, and so do their neighbors. For example, let's say my neighbor wants to turn his residential lot into a big cat sanctuary and then buys a tiger. Though he has certain property rights, I, as his neighbor and adjacent landowner, also have rights, specifically not having my children become tiger snacks if his tiger escapes. And I get that this is an exaggerated case, but I am trying to highlight the interplay of property rights amongst adjacent landowners. The Lee County Land Development Code is where the county government and the residents have come together and built consensus on how these competing rights work together. It provides an orderly and legal framework by which landowners can change the zoning and the uses of their properties without adversely affecting their neighbors and adjacent property owners. As in any legal undertaking, many believe the development process defined in the Lee County Land Development Code is too long, the permit requirements are too expensive. Their question then becomes, well, how do we sidestep or get around the Lee County Land Development Code? The answer to that is simple. You annex into a municipality, and that gets rid of Lee County, and it gets rid of the code. It's a win-win as developers maximize their profits and schedules, municipalities reap the impact fees and increased tax base. Most importantly, the sticky situation regarding the tiger snacks, I mean the neighbors and the adjacent landowners, is solved because they have no political power as they are not part of the municipality and therefore have no say. Many municipalities have spoken in front of this commission, and they have all told you to respect and protect property rights, and that there's no need to place new constraints on voluntary annexation. What they haven't told you, and what they won't tell you, is that Florida Statute 171.051, property owners have a process by which they can leave a municipality or de-annex. They also won't tell you that the de-annexation can only happen with the municipality's approval. They want to keep Lee County from gaining the same controls that they already possess. I don't know why a municipality has a right to stop voluntary de-annexation when the county does not have the right to stop voluntary annexation. I believe Pendergrass's amendment is an attempt to right this inequality. I support his amendment, and I would offer a few additions to the language. See attached. Many municipalities have mentioned that the Florida statutes already contain provisions to manage voluntary annexation via interlocal agreements. Specifically, they were speaking about Florida Statute 171.203. They are correct that interlocal agreements can be used to define and assist in the orderly execution of voluntary annexation if both parties agree. However, both parties must agree. If there is a disagreement between the parties, the interlocal agreement is never finalized and does not affect the voluntary annexation. This statute does not afford the same protection that Commissioner Pendergrass's amendment does, or something similar. My 5 minutes is nearly up. Thank you for your time today. I believe that Commissioner Pendergrass's amendment is a good starting place and should be kept. I've attached to these public comments some additional language I think may be beneficial to his amendment. The Charter Commission has expressed rewriting the amendment. If that is what occurs, then I would suggest Florida Statute 171.051 on de-annexation be used to afford the county the same protection the municipalities already have. Though my public comment is restricted to 5 minutes, I would be willing to answer questions if there are any.
Perfect timing, Mike. Thank you. Next speaker is Norman Cannon.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Am I hearable? Okay. I'm just here as a private citizen concerned about the process. I've attended a number of these meetings. I've tried to watch them online, but the audio is almost unintelligible of what's being said. Anyhow, my perception from watching and listening is that this amendment or this voluntary annexation seems to be the only thing that was important enough to be continued on this commission, which I disagree with, but also watching the way it's being worked around, I think it's a fait accompli that no matter what, you're going to pass it. I don't think it should. I think it takes away from home rule, which is the way I was brought up. Our country was founded under home rule from the bottom up, not from the top down. And I mean, that's about it. The other thing is a question. Why at this point in time do we have a new member on the commission?
All right, thank you. John Agnew.
Good evening, John Agnew. For the record, I'm the city attorney for the city of Sanibel. Appreciated having had the benefit of attending one of your all's meetings a couple of months ago and speaking then. I won't belabor those same points now. What I would like to do is just enter into the record, and I will provide it in a moment. A City of Sanibel City Council resolution that was passed this past week. Resolution 23-073. The title is a resolution of the City Council of the City of Sanibel, Florida, opposing any amendment to the Lee County Charter which would change requirements for voluntary annexation of privately owned property into the corporate limits of a Lee County municipality, and urging the County Charter Review Commission to reject any such proposal and providing an effective date. I know that the City Council appreciated, as did all of the different leadership of the different municipalities in Lee County, appreciated the opportunity, the invitation to come and to speak. I believe that you heard from all of the municipalities and heard a firm vocal opposition to it. The City of Sanibel's particular stated concerns dealt with, one, the diminishment of home rule authority of the City of Sanibel as well as the other municipalities within Lee County, the diminishment of the individual rights for self-determination regarding voluntary annexation, and third, that any legitimate concerns of the county could be addressed by less restrictive means through interlocal agreement. And while it's been talked about that interlocal agreements can be used to facilitate once there is an impasse, an issue. The proposal here is that an interlocal agreement be negotiated in advance. So something akin to what's being proposed in the charter, instead of to address it on the front end, to provide a framework for how these issues are addressed, rather than forcing an additional bureaucratic process on voluntary annexation, which itself is not an easy one. So with that, I'll just provide this resolution into the record, and those are the comments in opposition. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else want to speak this evening?
My name is Patty Duncan. I am a Fort Myers resident, and I just want to say that if Pine Island really believes that the county is going to protect them in this, you have only to understand what the county has done in terms of dismantling every development issue that you have. So if you're trying to keep your island protected from all this development that will come to your island, if you agree with the county on this, you are sadly misinformed.
Ma'am, will you just fill that out and get it to us before you leave? Okay, thank you. Anybody else want to speak this evening? No? Not seeing any hands. We're going to close public comment and move on to discussion with the board. Richard, do you want to start out? And I think we all have a copy of Richard's proposal for language. Does anybody not have it? Okay.
Mr. Chair, we also have two
I think
proposals from...
Maribel raised her hand.
It's in your...
You have it in your notebook? All right, before we proceed, Joe?
We also have two proposals from two of the other members. Andrew's son sent me one earlier, and then also Kevin did. So if I could pass those around.
Please. Well, let's wait a minute. We'll all see that. Do we want to review this into the record?
No, he's providing them.
Okay. Thank you. Yep.
Okay.
We all have copies of all of them now? Okay. Richard, do you want to start as long as you're here?
Sure. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. All right, so what I sent around was, I discussed with Joe Adams, Mr. Adams, and I discussed this a little bit, but what I passed around was, I won't say it's completely different, but it is quite different from what the original proposal that we had, but it does still address voluntary annexation. A lot of the discussion that we've had has surrounded on the concern by the county and by others that when property gets voluntarily annexed, there is not a cohesive plan for how that property is now going to receive utilities, going to get road service, going to get all these other things within the new municipality, right? Because now it may be disjointed, or it may already have, county services there. And how's this going to be resolved? So what I did was I kind of read through the statutory section, chapter 171, to try to see if there was something in there that might help us to solve this problem and really address the issue. And I think I've said in some of my comments before that, as the current version is drafted, I just don't think that's reasonable, because I don't think that it puts any control or any standard on the county. If the County Board of County Commissioners decides they don't want to approve somebody voluntarily annexing, they can just vote no, and there's no standard by which somebody could challenge that, which seems to me to be probably not the way it should be. There should be some standard applied. So what I did was I actually looked through the chapter 171, and if you look at chapter 171, you'll find section 171.042 Florida statutes. All right, and that section actually applies to not necessarily voluntary annexation. It applies to annexations by municipalities of areas. So if the municipality wants to initiate an annexation, 171.042 applies. And there are a set of criteria, things that must occur in order for the municipality to then put forward that. So most of what I lifted into this comes kind of right out of 171.042. There's some criteria that must be followed. And basically what it says is that before commencing any annexation procedure, and I changed it to the voluntary annexation statute, the owner or owners of the property seeking voluntary annexation have to prepare a feasibility study setting forth the plans to provide urban services to any area to be annexed. Okay, so basically what they have to do is, if they're going to annex out, they have to say, all right, well, how am I going to get water? How am I going to get sewer? All right, which addresses the real issue that we've seem to have had here. All right, and basically there's a set of criteria to what has to be done, this feasibility study that has to be prepared. So in a normal circumstance where a municipality was going to annex some property, this feasibility study would have to be done. But if you're voluntarily annexing, you don't have to do it, as the statute reads right now. So I sort of basically took that and said, well, let's apply it to a voluntary annexation, because it would then, I think, address some of the concerns that we've heard about what happens once somebody gets annexed in. And then what I did was I added a section down here, and I gave you an or, and again, just so everyone understands, this was sort of my spitballing effort at what something might look like. I'm not sure that, in fact, I'm confident that this wouldn't be final. We'd need to make some changes to this, and I'm not even sure I'm 100% behind it, but I thought it was something to discuss, right? So, but the idea would be that this feasibility study has to be prepared, all right? And the feasibility study showing how you're going to get urban services to this property once it's annexed into the municipality would then be filed with the county and filed with the municipality, all right? And then there's two options from there that I put in the or, all right? Either you could have it where basically county staff would then review the feasibility study, and from there they would make a determination of and they'd prepare a staff report, and they would say, hey, this feasibility study makes sense, it's supported by competent substantial evidence, you're good to go. And if it's supported by competent substantial evidence, you're good. There's two options under subsection 3 and potentially 4 that I put. One would be that the county would have to review the feasibility study and then approve it based on, and could only deny the ability to annex out if there was not competent substantial evidence. So it would put a standard on the county that is a standard that's recognized under current law and recognized under current administrative law, that's a real standard, okay? So that option would be you file the feasibility study, county staff reviews it, staff prepares a report and makes a recommendation. It is or is not supported by competent substantial evidence that urban services will be provided as set forth herein. And then the Board of County Commissioners is obligated to approve it as long as there is that evidence. The other option, which I think I personally like better, okay, is that feasibility study is filed with the municipality that they want to annex into. That municipality prepares a staff report and analysis of it, and then the municipality, which gets to vote on the voluntary annexation one way or the other, can approve it, but they can only approve it if it's supported by competent substantial evidence. And then the county could then challenge it in court if they felt it wasn't supported by that, okay? So that would put a standard on it. There's a couple of issues that I think would bear discussion out of what I've drafted here. One of them is that there's not, one of the issues that we've heard a little bit about is roads and roadway improvement. All right, so as this is drafted and as it currently stands in 171.042, it addresses basically water and sewer. It doesn't really address roadways, okay? So you might want to put something in there to address that. I struggled with how to do that and what that might look like, all right? And so we may want to have that discussion, and we may want to see if there's a way to add that in if the will of the commission here is that we like this or we don't like it. The thing about transportation, just so everybody understands, is that there's already some Florida statutes and some sections in the codes of most municipalities and certainly in the county about proportionate share payments that anybody who's doing development has to pay in order to get development rights and things like that. So a lot of that's already addressed. I think what's maybe not addressed is the issue of who's going to maintain the roadway once the annexation occurs and whose responsibility, the municipality or the county, it's going to be. So that's number one. That's one issue that I think bears some discussion and maybe some input from the county attorney's office. Second issue that I think, and actually Mr. Besser, Kevin Besser raised this in what he sent around. This is an issue that I have too, is that by doing this, you would be placing an additional financial burden on the property owner that wants to annex out by requiring that individual or entity, whoever it is, then prepare this feasibility study, which would cost money. You'd have to hire an engineering firm to look at the line sizes and so on and so forth, and it would cost money. And so there is that question about placing that burden on the property owner and determining whether we feel comfortable doing that. I'm not sure how I come down on that. Ultimately, most property owners who are annexing out or are looking to develop something, at the end of the day, they got to pay for a lot of stuff anyway. There's costs of development, and that's just the reality. So I'm not sure that's a total stumbling block for me, but it is an issue that I think bears or warrants discussion, certainly. The third issue is, as this is sort of drafted, so just to walk a little bit through subsection C as to what the statements would be in here, and I'll talk about them briefly, is that you've got to provide a statement setting forth the plans of the municipality for extending to the area to be annexed, and I put in here whether through construction of such facilities or through interlocal agreement, all right? Specifically contemplating that there can be an interlocal agreement that would satisfy the elements of this feasibility study between the county, if necessary, and the municipality. All right. Each major municipal service performed with the municipality at the time of annexation, and specifically the plans must provide for extending urban services except as otherwise provided to the area to be annexed on the date of annexation on substantially the same basis and in the same manner as such services are provided. The second would be to provide for the extension of existing municipal water and sewer services into the area to be annexed so that when such services are provided, property owners in the area to be annexed will be able to secure public water and sewer service according to the policies in effect in such municipality. The third, if the extension of trunk water mains and sewer mains into the area to be annexed is necessary, set forth a proposed timetable for construction. And fourth is basically how you're going to pay for it if you've got to extend it. So I said that I had one other concern here. My other concern is, let's say hypothetically you've got a piece of land that right now today they want to annex into a municipality. There is no water or sewer service there today. There's quite a bit of that land that's still around, okay? This would contemplate that in the feasibility study you'd have to show how are you going to get there and how are you going to finance it. But realistically, in a lot of cases, that timetable may be way down the road, right? So you may be looking at a feasibility study that's talking about, well, yeah, we can do it, but we can't do it for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, something like that. And I don't know how to quite address that issue. I struggled with that. I struggled with what you would do. But ultimately, kind of bringing it full circle, where I was trying to go with this was to get back to a place where we had a proposal that sort of addressed the concerns of getting urban services, roadways, making sure that those issues were addressed if somebody's going to annex out of the county, instead of just, hey, they can annex, and now after they annex, now we figure it all out. And we have heard from many of the municipalities and the individuals that have spoken that, well, hey, there's already a provision in the statute that allows them to enter into these interlocal agreements. And there's no doubt there is, but it's a may, it's not a shall. And that is one of the concerns here is by doing it this way, you sort of force them to use that section of interlocal agreements before they do this. And it doesn't say you can't do it. It's just saying you're going to have to figure out how you're going to get everything there before you annex it out, so that we actually have an orderly provision of these urban services to this property instead of, hey, we're going to annex it because, hey, I want a different zoning than what the county is going to let me have or some other reason, and figure it out all later, and then they realize later down the road that it's a problem. So this is what I was trying to accomplish. I don't know. Like I said, I think that there are maybe some issues with it that need to be hammered out, but I did think that it was something that might warrant some discussion here in front of everyone. So I'm happy to answer any questions about it or have further discussion if you'd like.
Great start. So, yeah, Richard did a great job laying all of that stuff out. I'm sure some of us have questions, so let's ask Richard, and then we'll get to the other handouts that we had. Anybody? Randy, Chris?
sorry, I'm just first meeting, and I did meet with Joe, and I'm kind of up to speed about what we're doing, but what is the major problem with the current process?
So, as I understand it, from what we've heard from everyone, from Commissioner Pendergrass and some of the others, and I do know from some personal experience that there are scenarios that are out there where property owners are annexing out, and then you've got a question of, okay, well, how are we getting water there, right? The water, there's either not water now, or there's currently county provided water, but now we're not getting reimbursed. How do we get reimbursed? Those are the issues that seem to be the concerns that were raised by Commissioner Pendergrass. The way the current proposed amendment was drafted, while it sort of addressed a little bit of that, it basically just left it up to the county to say, hey, we don't have to approve it if we don't want to. They can vote no. And so I was trying to find a middle ground that if that really is the issue, that we're worried about having urban services provided to this property, something that would actually address that issue and do so in a way that's already laid out in statute. Does that make sense?
It does, but I'm not sure you can solve the problem with voluntary or involuntary or any kind of annexation, because the water, just like what's been happening in the city of Fort Myers, where 3, 4, or 5 years to solve a shortage of water production. Doesn't matter if you wanted to get annexed or not, you couldn't get a water availability certificate for your development. So is that a reason not to plan for the next 3 or 5 years before you break ground? I don't know. It just seems kind of like this is going around in circles either way, my opinion.
I think one of the main problems is you guys are each a piece of property. You're in Lee County, he's in the city of Fort Myers, and he's in Lee County. She wants to now annex him. You gotta go across Lee County to get there. So
Keith,
who really needs to
talk into your mic a little bit better.
So we're worried about Lee County handles the water and sewer, transmission mains, whatever goes to service his property. Now, the city's gonna come in and say, I'm gonna annex him. He wants to come in and develop it. The county won't let me because we don't have the ability to do it, but the city will. So I'm gonna annex him, and I'm gonna take over the water and sewer, even though the county's the one that paid for it. Back in the 80s.
Sort of they
Well,
paid for it.
back in '88, I laid a water line for the county. Back to 20 years later, I had to lay a water line for the city. They've been abandoning the county's water line.
You pay your bill and somehow it recoups the cost of these services.
Well, it's true on a county, but say Pine Island, smaller utility. They build facilities to handle a part of Matlacha. Hopefully not in Eric's time, but Cape Coral comes in and annexes it. Well, we're going to provide the water and sewer. We don't need your water. So now Pine Island, poor Pine Island, has then provided all the pump stations and all the mains and everything to service that property that now just gets taken away.
So how does this, one way or the other, and I don't have a firm grip on it, how does it solve it?
Well, the way I look at it, I go in and buy 5 acres on Matlacha that's serviced by Pine Island. That's where it's serviced by. Now, if Cape Coral wants to annex me, or I want to agree to have them annexing, I can't just tell Pine Island, go away, because you've got the service agreement. So that part of that interlocal agreement needs to be, okay, well, Pine Island's already provided the water and sewer, or the water, not the sewer, provided the water. So we're gonna have agreement where I pay Pine Island for the water. I don't pay Cape Coral. So Cape Coral runs another water main and just abandons Pine Islands. You can't do that. That just kills the utility. Same thing with the fire departments. That's why they are so much against it, because they're like, we've already built these fire stations. We've already done this stuff to service this area. And now all of a sudden we lose it. Now the taxpayers are on the hook having to pay for the bonds or whatever they had to develop that fire station. So the attorney, he made a good point about interlocal agreement, but it needs to be before annexation, not after, because, when it's annexed, we can tell the fire department, we're not pay nothing.
But are there examples where it's been a major problem one way or the other?
Yeah, that's why we're all here. There was a piece of property, and maybe somebody else can say a little better, but on Daniels Road.
Trying to bring in Matlacha.
Yeah, well,
Is that the whole reason for this discussion?
No. That's just a little piece of, that could be a problem. The problem was a parcel on Daniels Road that was on County Road, County Water and Sewer, developer couldn't develop his piece of property because of stipulations in the LEAP plan or whatever, development code. But the city of Fort Myers says, well, guess what? If you're part of the city, heck yeah, we can develop the crap out of it. All of a sudden, he wants to be annexed. But Lee County is one who's going to take the blunt of the problem for the traffic, for the water and sewer and everything. So there's somewhere there's got to be a part where, your land has got to be contiguous, to the piece of property. You've got to be able to supply water and sewer and fire and everything else, and then annexation is a rubber stamp.
I think Commissioner Pendergrass's point is well taken about this, that, somebody else over here. I mean, I don't know how we solve that either, because it's all over the county, and this is a large county.
Yeah, well, if you were to say that a piece of property is going to be annexed is contiguous to Cape Coral, and Cape Coral's got the water and sewer right there, that's a good point where that person can be annexed, and no problem. And even I'm a little bit about the Lee County future water and service area. Well, they're not providing water service yet. So that might be an area where annexation would be available. But if you run water lines and you run pump stations and you do all this kind of expense, and if Ron goes in with his and buys that piece of property because he just wants to annex it. He's like that. Well, guess what? You bought it knowing you're part of Lee County. You're not part of the city of Fort Myers.
So is there a plan that would say how you pay this county back for their investment?
Let me just interject. We're here tonight in discussion to talk about if we're going to, what's going to come out of the commission is a proposal, depending on how many votes we get, either going to the county commission or going on the ballot next year. So we don't have a plan yet. These are some thoughts and ideas. So we're brainstorming. So your thoughts and ideas on how to, if we're going to come out with something, the language that we might come up with, and or how to hopefully solve the issues that we see exist.
So is that comment out of order, or what?
No, you asked the question. I just wanted to clarify.
So is there a mechanism that we're going to put in there to pay each other for different things?
All these.
I didn't see anything about
We're not
paying fire, paying for sewer, paying for.
Not nowhere near there yet.
That's why I'm thinking I'm not sure we're solving anything.
That's hopefully is what we do solve whenever we get that point.
We're just starting.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm good.
Richard?
Yeah, so I just had a thought, just listening to the two of you talk about it, that, maybe, and I was scribbling some notes down here, but we could add something in that might say something along the lines of where existing services are provided by the county or other water provider, and there's several, and then you could say, the feasibility study and all future development shall ensure that the existing facilities with adequate capacity are fully utilized, and then further address, that they're going to get compensated. I think it could be written in. I think it's a very valid concern, too.
So, we can propose or put whatever we want. We're going to have a discussion, and hopefully in the next meeting in December, we're going to finalize something that we're going to be able to take out. So tonight we're brainstorming. When you go home tonight, you're going to have homework. We're going to come back in December and hopefully pound out what we're going to have. So.
Is this, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, is this the only issue we're dealing with at this point?
That's the only topic we have before us this session. Mary Ann.
Is there currently a fee structure in place to cross all these interlocal agreements and pay each other back if people start messing with the boundary lines?
I can answer that as best I can.
Go ahead.
I think that the answer is in certain circumstances there are interlocal agreements that provide for how that's going to be done, but in many others I don't think there are. Maybe Mr. Adams could better answer that question than me.
You're doing pretty good so far. That was a punt. And yes, there's statutes that apply to the fire districts and other independent districts specifically that lay out what the process is, but typically it's through interlocal agreements, or if the city were to take over the servicing the area, then they would extend their lines and they would take over servicing that property. If not, it would typically be an interlocal agreement.
Lisa?
So I would recommend that at this point we take a vote as to whether we're in favor of moving forward with it or not. and then possibly at the next meeting, and maybe this is your plans already, and I'm speaking too soon, and then hash out the specific verbiage, which is, I think, what Joe mentioned at one point, is that, where we started was a draft, and now we have a lot more to consider. So thank you for that, Mr. Aiken. But at this point, at least, I guess I'd make a motion that we vote on it.
And what would that motion be?
Well, before we get there, any other comments?
I thought we did that last time.
Did we?
Yeah, I thought we voted last time that this was what that was for. This discussion, we're going to debate out all these ideas. We're going to throw them out there with the idea being that in December, pen will be to paper, and whatever final language may or may not go forward will be put up to its final vote.
Right. So that's why we're here tonight.
Right.
For discussion, for thoughts, for brainstorming, to see what we're going to be able to put together when we come back together in December. But any more questions of Richard, thoughts or ideas about what he has to say?
I do have a question.
Lisa?
I guess more towards Joe and Andrea is, I guess I'm struggling a little bit as to whether more specifics as to what we have here in the recommendation, or just a more general amendment, which is where we started. And, sort of see how that works, and then take it from there and add additional language, as opposed to starting with such a detailed plan. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
The detailed language will not appear on the ballot. It will just be a summary. It's how we actually implement the language into the charter. That's what's going to happen. That language would be in the charter. It would not be on the ballot. Only a summary would be on the ballot.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Somewhat.
Andrew?
The only other question I had on the level of detail, I think Mr. Adams has said that we can't put language in together that says, here's our rough idea, the voters go vote on said language. We have to put all the detail of the language together so that the voters know exactly what they're voting on, and it's not getting built after the fact by a county commission.
Yeah,
so I think the detail is necessary, even if it's a little more work for us.
Randall?
My two takeaways of the conversation and the supplementally submitted comments, one would be that all of the details would be worked out before the annexation occurs. I think that's a critical point, whether it's an interlocal agreement or how we do it, and then some sort of timeline not to exceed that the process would occur, so there wasn't an unlimited time delay before the action could be taken. Those are the two takeaways that I'm receiving tonight, and if we can plug something like that in, I think you've done a great job preparing a preliminary, and I thank you for it.
Randy?
I definitely agree with the timeline. That's a good point.
Yes.
The more you put in it, the more it becomes political. And this is already a political football on annexation all the time. And I just don't want us to see us make it even more cumbersome to the property owner, so that this political gamesmanship of annexation gets even harder.
All of the details that could be determined prior to the annexation would include a timeline, so it could all be in one bundle.
That's a great point.
Just my thought.
Ron?
I appreciate Richard putting this language together, because I think my concerns when Mr. Pendergrass first brought this forward, and then we heard from the mayors and the representatives from the cities, is we're kind of far apart, and I was thinking, how do we figure out how to get some common ground to where there's some analysis done, as opposed to just a strict yes or no on annexation, and the city would say that this is what we want to do. The county would, nope, we're not going to let that happen without having competent, sufficient information, as Richard was talking about, to support that. I think we're getting closer to what I believe is a good solution, and that is having the cities and the county and the applicant figure out how do we make this go forward to address all these various concerns and issues that people have raised. I would think that the cities haven't seen this language yet, so we don't know what they might think about it, but I'm not sure that it gets where we need to go. Richard had 2 or 3 more points we need to think about, but I believe where we're at, we voted at the 30,000 foot level last time to consider the issue and continue talking about it. Now we're honing down to what needs to be the meat on those bones to talk about. And then as Andrea said, what goes on the ballot is limited to just a certain number of words. It's not this 2 or 3 pages. It's very, very small. So we've got to think about how that goes as well. But I believe we have a really good start, and it's a chance to think about how specific do we want to get to encourage the discussion and perhaps interlocal agreements between the cities and the county if it is going to move forward on a particular parcel. Some of them are very easily done. If they're enclaves, that's kind of pretty easy to do. So maybe there might be a little bit of an exception for that. I don't know. But anyway, I believe we're heading in the right direction.
Thank you, Ron. Eric?
For Randy's benefit, I think also to refresh us, I'd ask one of the attorneys, if you can, to discuss right now when there's an annexation into either a fire service area, utility service area, and there is no agreement that's worked out. What happens today with the services from the date of annexation forward? And again, I know there's a time frame in which I think it reverts to the city. Could you explain that to Randy and refresh my memory on that too?
Sure. So the specific statute within the same chapter of 171, it gets into a very detailed process about the district and the municipality entering into negotiations in an attempt to enter into an interlocal agreement. There's provisions for if there's an impasse, then there's a process where they go before the circuit court. And it discusses the finances and basically it's worked out by the court if they can't come to an agreement. But that's specific to these independent districts and municipalities.
I thought, and that's why I'm asking the question, that if there was no agreement at the annexation, that service would continue to be provided by that special district, right, or the utility. Am I wrong about that?
For at least a time frame. I can look it up real quick.
Yeah. 5 years?
I think so.
Okay, that's what I thought too. So I just want to make sure that you understand they don't just stop servicing or the city doesn't come in immediately to provide those services if there's no agreement. And that's one of the things we've talked about too, is in reality, is the city is working with the special districts currently? And there were some examples where there's been a discussion where they discussed it and they worked it out prior to annexation. And there are other times where either that hasn't occurred, and I don't know on whose fault that is, whether you blame the special district or the cities, but there hasn't been that discussion. And I think that's what we're all trying to resolve here, is how is it did that discussion occur? Can it occur within the framework we have today, which I still believe we can, or do we need our charter amended to make that framework, to make that communication occur? Appreciate that.
Maribel?
First of all, I wasn't here last meeting, so I want to apologize. I had a foreseen situation at home with water pipes because I'm doing a lot of remodeling. But I really, reading this, I think that we're really heading in the right direction because we're not throwing the ball to any court. We're just coming up with like sort of a protocol as to what should happen, A, B, C, before we get to D. And I think that's not in place right now. And as the city grows, and as we've seen growth, maybe the things that worked in the past, not necessarily to me, are working correctly now because there's so much growth in the city. And before it becomes a chaos, if we have some sort of protocol that can help alleviate where he or she or no or yes, and there's a protocol in place and that they follow those orders, like, you know, how it's detailed here, I think we can get somewhere.
Good comments.
One more question.
Mr. Chris?
For Joe, if I may.
Please.
Commissioner Pendergrass talked about the areas that are kind of abandoned in between other areas. On Coconut Road was his example. Do the municipalities or the county have the ability to just give it away, the rights to that road or whatever you're talking about?
Yes, there's a vacation process, it's called. It's not as fun as a vacation, but, but yeah, it's a petition to vacate, and basically the municipalities or the county could vacate the public interest in that, and then it would revert to the private property owners to take over.
The land still would remain in the city or the county, but the county then gets the rights, or would the city limits?
Right of way, right. So it's, right. It's still within the jurisdiction of the city or the county, but it's no longer the county's for maintenance purposes and right-of-way purposes. It'd become a private road, basically.
Any more thoughts or questions regarding Richard's thoughts and proposal? No?
I just want to thank you
Eric?
for your time to do this. Well, I may not agree with where we'll wind up in the end, but the fact that the standards are placed on it was really an important step, and I appreciate you doing that.
Thank you. Andrew, you've got a comment that you've laid out. Do you want to?
Yeah, I'll start, and I also start by thanking Richard for his language. As you can see, one of the items that I had, I'll start at the bottom of my concerns, was the subjective nature of a county commission vote with no real standards, and how do you remove that to say that if there was an interlocal agreement had been reached, that the role of the county commission would essentially be null and void at this point. The two parties have come to an agreement; they don't need to be involved in this process. At that point. So that was one, I think this is one way to address that. So I'm glad to discuss that. The second direction I'm going here has to do with what we're hearing from special districts, especially fire districts, is that the burden here is somehow a cost burden on them financially to continue operating. And so this would just say, if we're going to add all of these hurdles that property owners will have to go through, that let's make sure that truly is them leaving that special district truly would be a burden on the financial interest of that special district. So this would just say that it would either be 5% of the annual ad valorem revenues. If it's below that threshold, that's a relatively small percent overall. As we've heard, over 5 years, right, they'll still continue to service and receive those. So they essentially have 5 years to plan for that change. And then similar 5% of user-generated fees from any utility to just remove the burden, especially I think if we look at some of the language that Richard's put forward. Good language, but there's a lot of extra steps. So if this is a smaller property that is especially residential lot, let's try to, how do we avoid keeping them getting tied up in that process? And so not opposed to any discussion on language or how this fits in, but the goal is just try to keep the average citizen from having to, not to the dismay of any of my lawyers and engineer friends on the commission, but avoid having to use their services.
Randall?
Wouldn't that put the regulatory body, in which case the county commission, back into the role of decision maker if that 5% or any override fees had to be implemented?
So I think if we go over, if they're over 5%, correct, then yes, then that's why I still thought there was a need to address the issue of the county commission. But if it's under the 5%, then it's such a small value.
It's a private agreement between two
it's a
parties.
Small value. If the city wants to annex, they absolutely can. And that special district is giving up a very small portion of their overall revenues that it should not affect the day-to-day operations they can account for in the 5 years that the statute allows for. And then, I mean, the values there is just a simple calculation of using the property appraiser's values. We're not going to get complicated in how we do that math.
But I think there's more issues than just whether it's changing, where the utilities are coming from, or the 5%. 5% could be a lot of money or not a lot of money. But, and there's issues whether it's just a single small lot, like you were saying, or a bigger piece of property that is going to be annexed in for particular purposes, development, and so on, as we saw in a particular case on Daniels and Tree Line situation. 1 second, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think, as I've already spoken on this, and I may be the one who has reared us the example of Tiger King in Lee County in public comment today with my support of property rights, and that's fine, but I tend to value the property rights of the property owner over that of their neighbor, and so I don't see that as much of a concern that needs to be addressed by county government. I think this does still need to be addressed by county government, though, when it comes to the legal agreements between the governing bodies.
Mary Bill?
I thinking of what he's saying, I'm honestly, I don't know much about, but instead of it being like 5% of the tax, would it be after X amount of acres? If it's, the land use will be over an acre or over 2 acres, depending on that, the size of the land. Can it be, well, if it's, we're going to develop over 10 acres, maybe then we need to go through all these protocol steps. And that protects the small, you know, whether I'm going to build in an acre or 2 because it's a residential over it. If it's over an X amount of acres, maybe then we can apply this.
I considered using acreage. Where I came down on revenues was that it was relatively easy to calculate for all the bodies, and because a lot of the concern from the special districts was the cost to and the burden to them, I thought the best way to alleviate that was that no one is going to walk away with this process with their budget being cut in half, right? It's not like someone is just completely gutting them. They still have a responsibility to do everything with none of the financial resources. They'll still be largely whole and have 5 years to plan for and account for that change.
Randy?
We're talking hypothetical, and this probably would never happen, but what about an accumulative effect of 3 or 4 different 4.5% of one district along a coconut road or something like that, where it really did affect them, but they can't stop it because each one of them were under a 5% threshold?
Absolutely.
Good question, good issue. Go ahead, Andrew.
Absolutely possible. My challenge or retort to it would be that if we just look at history, that's yet to ever been a problem. Does not mean that it can't be a problem. Just data suggests it's really unlikely to ever happen.
And I think there's more elements that are involved other than just what you're talking about in your proposal as to what might happen or what the purpose is for the land being annexed in and how it's affecting other elements besides. So I think that we need more than just that or not that as a criteria itself. Anybody else?
I just think the piece of property that's looking to be annexed needs to be adjacent to that service area. Whether it's Lee County, Cape Coral, wherever, you know, you can't be 3 or 4 parcels down and want to be annexed by City of Fort Myers or whatever. You know, it needs to be contiguous. It needs to be.
I think that's the rules now, isn't it?
That's not what they were trying to do on the tree line.
It could be. Is that a rule?
The property lines need to be contiguous under the statute.
It must be now, right?
Yes.
They must be now, because I was trying to do one for the county, and I got to get 2 more property owners to agree to get to the edge of City of Fort Myers.
Okay, I got you. That's good. That's fine. I didn't think it was.
Any other questions, thoughts, comments? You also have a handout here from Kevin Besserer, who's not here tonight. You might want to just take a glance at it to see what it says. We have a meeting coming up in December where hopefully, and the goal is to hash out language, so if we're going to do something and present something, December is a meeting where we're going to hopefully finalize that. So as we go into the next year, we'll have something, correct?
I think we're also looking for more direction tonight. They just don't get to leave and think they've provided enough direction for us.
That's the teacher. She's...
I mean, there were a lot of discussion about financial burden of the property owner, address roadways, no water sewer service. You all have to discuss that. So we have some direction, and at least Richard will be able to maybe answer some of those questions. But you can't leave here tonight without giving us something else and answering those questions.
I would ask you to do that.
Thank you, Randall. Mary Ann?
When you say property owner, it could be someone who owns a single lot in a house, their own house, or it could be a developer that wants to develop a corner and build 200 lots, and so the taxes will be better, so that has more appeal to a municipality. So in in calling the person a landowner, you're not really distinguishing on whether or not a developer is going to probably create a significant impact on the infrastructure, whereas a single home may or may not.
Which is a situation we see a whole bunch of times. Randy?
We focus on a developer, but annexation can be a whole neighborhood of, I know 2 different places in Fort Myers where the city would love to annex the whole neighborhoods, and it's 175 homes off at Plantation and Deer Farms Road, or down at the Villas, some of those. So they're looking at those, and that would be a massive referendum process and all that, but they would love to do it because of the juxtaposition of the services that they currently have. So it's not just, we're not just thinking in terms of a developer.
Andrew?
Just for clarification, because I think we've had a lot of conversation where we've blurred the lines between voluntary annexations, which I think is what specifically this is trying to address, and numerous other annexations, whether that be the city of Cape Coral, and in my opinion, wrongfully, right, trying to take Matlacha or portions of. I think what Randy has just talked about.
I think you're right. I think you're right about that.
So there are a lot of different types, and Mr. Adams, I think when we asked this question before, but the majority of these voluntary annexations are single property owners, not legally restricted to that, but just the reality of practice is they're single property owners.
Right, and it gets a little complicated. Where I think Mr. Theichthaler was going was in the Cape Coral case, they actually bought the land. So they were the property owner, and they went through the voluntary annexation process as a property owner, not as annexing it into their cities, and it was a different property owner. But yes, this provision that we're looking at here is limited to voluntary annexation, where the property owner has to be a petitioner to the city.
Property owner and or somebody who's got a contract to buy that?
I've never reviewed an annexation because we don't deal with those, but I would imagine that the property owner needs to sign.
The owner could potentially have someone act as their attorney in fact, but the owner would still be the applicant.
Right.
So to answer, and maybe this is out of line, but to answer the attorney's question.
Eric, into your microphone.
Yeah. To answer the attorney's question, and again, I don't see myself supporting this, but with that said, I think what Richard has brought forward is pretty well laid out. I do like the or option better, where basically the city is the one that determines there's substantial competent evidence, and then the county would need to appeal it to have that turned over. So unless, again, I'm not going to make this motion, by the way, but what I think should probably be done is to say, generally speaking, the language in what Richard's brought forward, 1, 2, and then the 3 and 4 on the second page should be kind of the base from which you work. And then if there's anything else that anyone here feels should be added or discussed, then that can be done too. But I think that, although I probably don't agree with it, I think it's very well laid out and addresses a lot of the issues that have been brought up on both sides.
So I do have a question. Richard did bring up roadways. Do you all want to discuss if you want to include roadways?
I do believe it should include roadways. With that being said, I'm still a little concerned that it's going to make the process too cumbersome. I don't know what the right answer is just yet, but I am a little concerned with that. I think it's very well laid out, but maybe more in line with what Kevin wrote in his email as far as like the feasibility study and that sort of thing. That's my concern at this time.
Thank you. Andrew?
A question for Richard with this language. Currently, the property owner is the one who's going to conduct all these efforts and then provide it to the city, and the city would be fact-checking or in very many ways doing their own study of the same work effort. Would it make sense that the first step be the property owner petition the municipal government? If municipal government wants to go forward with the annexation, they would go and provide proof that they're capable of providing all of these services that we've outlined. And then at that point, once they have published that study and they're in good standing and they think they've met sort of the requirements that law sets forth, then the annexation moving forward with the county's ability to...
Well, that would be part of the feasibility study, would it not?
So what I think I hear him saying is that basically the feasibility study would actually be done by the municipality in essence instead of by the owner. Here's my response to that. I understand the concern about putting the burden on the property owner, the financial burden of doing this feasibility study. Like I said before, I have some concern about that. I'm not sure that that really that issue sways me. The concern that I would have about putting it on the municipality is, well, we are in our charter now saying that the municipality has to do something, has to prepare a feasibility study for the benefit of a property owner that's petitioning for voluntary annexation, and I don't know that that really works out. I mean, I don't know. I mean, first of all, when you file any real sort of application in any municipality or in the county that I know of, you pay an application fee, and that application fee in large part is meant to defray the cost of county staff doing the review work and all the stuff that has to be done. That's the whole point of it. So I would assume there'd have to be some fee paid. I don't know, and then that municipality would have to figure out what that fee is going to be. I mean, I think if you're going to do this, you have to put it on the property owner to perform this study. I think that's the only realistic way to do it. I do think that you could have a conversation about whether you exempt somebody, some class of property owners from doing this feasibility study. Maybe you exempt enclaves, like Mr. Inge said, from having to do this because, and I don't remember as I sit here what the statute says on enclaves, so I don't know. Maybe we should look at that. I don't know. But I think if you want to annex out, I mean, there are definitely some property owners that are an individual lot owner who wants to be in the city, and that might be a burden on them. I get that. I don't think that's the majority of cases. So I don't know. I don't think we can put it on the municipality. I think it has to, if we're going to go this route, which again, I don't know if we are or not. I don't know how everyone feels, and I understand that there may be some discussion to have. I think it has to be on the property owner to establish. If they're the ones who want to move into the municipality, the services are there for them once they do that, and they got to line it up.
Go ahead, Randall.
Let's call it what it is. If we have one municipality that doesn't get along with the neighboring municipality, there's going to be a roadblock and a log jam, and the private property owner gets cut out of the opportunity. And I would totally agree. It needs to be on the burden of the property owner in order to present the case. That would be my opinion, if you want to preserve private property rights.
And I would have to agree with that.
Andrea, do you want to continue with the roadway to see where we all stand?
Yeah.
I'm in favor of adding it.
So my comment on the roadways is, I struggle with that. Yes, I was working on this yesterday afternoon, and I struggled with what to do about roadways to add it in here because of the other statutes that deal with proportionate share and traffic studies and all the things that go into that. It's a different animal, right? And I didn't have time to sit down and analyze it all, to be honest with you, and really come to an understanding. Maybe with the roadways, if you want to add it, what my thought is, and I really love the input of Mr. Adams and everyone else, do you put something in there that says if, in the event that the property fronts on a county roadway or something of that nature, that you have to enter into, there must be an interlocal agreement to share in the cost of maintenance of the roadway? I don't know, but that gets so messy. I'm not sure. That's why this is where I struggled when I got to that. It was a major roadblock for me to figure out how to really address the roadway issue. So, yeah, no pun intended, exactly. So I'm not saying that I don't think it should be included. I just struggled with how to get there. So if we want to draft that, I would suggest that maybe we ask county attorney's office to help us do that, and I'm happy to talk to Mr. Adams. I was really just trying to get something out in front of everyone that I thought made a little bit more sense than what we had beforehand, which I couldn't support at all. So,
and if we take the traffic issue, the roadway issue further, it's not necessarily, or maybe it is an issue of new roadways, but it's the additional burden that what is being planned for that property being annexed in, the burden that's going to have on the existing roadways besides.
I think there must be something in place already, because like Fort Myers Beach, county owns Cerro Boulevard.
Right, and there's a lot of, so for example, and not only the county, but you have to understand that some aren't even county roadways, some are DOT, state DOT owned roadways, right? And so who pays and who maintains those is laid out in different places, and it's not just a straightforward answer. Like everybody thinks, oh, well, think of a good one, it's not Pine Island Road, it's Burnstall Road, right? Oh, Burnstall Road, City of Cape Coral can just fix it. Well, I don't think they can. I think that there's other issues that other folks have to widen this. Same thing going on with State Road 31 up in North Fort Myers. that area, it's not just as simple as the county has the ability to do it, because in many cases the county does not. It's somebody else has jurisdiction. So it just gets messy, and that's why I didn't address it, because I frankly didn't know how.
Yeah, like I said, there must be something that does occur. Bristol Road, part of it's.
There are, and maybe Joe could talk. I mean, I know there are statutes about proportionate share payments that go to roadways, right? So if you're a developer and you come in and you say, hey, I want to develop this parcel and I want to put this piece of whatever commercial on it, okay? The Land Development Code and other places provide, hey, there's an analysis of what your impact is going to be, whether you have to do turn lanes, whether you have to do other things. There's proportionate share payments that have to be made, as far as your impact on the roadway with your development. And where those payments ultimately go after they get paid, I'm not sure I know the answer to that. I think they go to different places based upon whose job it is to maintain that roadway. But again, I think that's where it's not so straightforward.
And I would agree with what you said about bringing the roadways in. It does get complicated. I mean, you made reference to state law. We don't have concurrency anymore. And, it deals with impact fees and proportionate share agreements. And, there's developments that are on state facilities, county facilities, city facilities. It does make it more complicated to deal with that issue. One thought that I had was the impact fee issue. I don't know what that would look like, but it's my understanding that potentially some of these developers that are annexing in, paying impact fees, where's that money going to? If they're on a county road, where's that money going to? That's something we could look into between now and the next meeting. But yes, it does get complicated as far as the roadways goes.
Are you talking about impact fees if it gets annexed in, that developer building, and then of course he's not paying impact fees to the county anymore, he's paying them to the city or whatever.
Right.
Are we answering your questions, Andrea?
I think you also want to ask Joe. Joe's going to be doing a lot of the drafting.
So would the directive be to take Richard's draft and add a couple items in which would clarify the procedure, such as it had to be agreed upon by all parties involved prior to the annexation, which would include funding, which would include interlocal agreements and those kind of minute details that are compiled into a deal? Is that all we're looking for, is that everything has to be agreed in up front?
Or are we getting too specific with that?
So if I'm answering the question, what I was trying to do was say, you got to lay out how these services are going to be provided. There's got to be a plan, and the plan's got to be a realistic and a reasonable plan supported by competent, substantial evidence, not just and we'll figure it out later, which is kind of in many cases, I think, how it gets done now. So that was the purpose of the feasibility study. I think you could add something in here. I added in paragraph C where I said, a statement setting forth the plans of the municipality for extending to the area to be annexed, and then I added in parentheses, this is not in 170-1042, whether through construction of such facilities or through interlocal agreement, specifically to contemplate the idea that you could solve the problem of not having adequate urban services by entering into an interlocal agreement between the county and the municipality, or in some cases the municipality and a special district, or whoever it might be. Or you could just solve it by saying, hey, well, in this specific circumstance, the municipality is going to provide water and sewer, so we don't have to worry about an interlocal agreement. I think the other issue that Mr. Chris raised earlier and Mr. Dean raised earlier was about in certain circumstances, you've already got, let's say, Pine Island providing water, okay? And in those circumstances, should we try to add something in, and this was the note I made, that I think would be a good idea to add in. Something along the lines of where existing services are provided by county or other special districts, and there may be another caveat we have to add in there. The feasibility study shall ensure that existing facilities with capacity are fully utilized, and there may be some additional language there, but the idea is to utilize what's there. In other words, so if you've got water being provided by somebody already, they've got the plant, they've got capacity, that we can't just come in and say, all right, we're not going to use you anymore, we're going to use the city, or we're going to use whoever else it is. You got to use what's there, prevent waste, right? Some standard by which, I don't know if that's a big problem. I'm not sure. I'm I haven't heard that being a big problem, but I've heard others say that it is, so I don't have any personal knowledge of that. I don't know if that needs to be added or not, but I suspect if it's not a problem anyway, that adding the language in wouldn't be a problem or wouldn't be a negative. So I would like to, personally, if we're going to go with something like this or consider this further, I'd like to look at some language like that, and I'd love to hear what the county attorney's office might propose in that regard. Yeah, does that make sense, Mr. Mercer?
Anyway, Maribel?
And about the time frame, can that be added in, that you have X amount of time once it's submitted to whoever, the petition, so it doesn't just sit there and between, whether it's like a 3-month timeline, a 6-month, or you have up to 5-6 months to, to give this owner. Is that reasonable to add into this as well?
So I guess I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. When you say a time frame, are you talking about a time frame for approval?
Yes.
Okay, so let me say this. My personal preference here, I gave you an or, all right? My personal preference is the or, okay, is that it gets filed, is that it gets filed with the municipality and that the county board of county commissioners does not get to vote to approve it, but that the municipality may approve it, but if they approve it, it's got to meet this standard, and then if the county thinks it doesn't meet it, they can do whatever they want, right? They can challenge it. In that scenario, I don't think you need a time frame on the approval, because I think it's ultimately if the municipality wants to approve it, approve the annexation, and the owner wants to move forward with it, then they're going to move forward, all right? I think the other time frame that was discussed as a distinction, though, I think Mr. Mercer brought it up, and I think Mr. Adams brought it up, was, okay, the scenario where there are no urban services. You've got a piece of property that has nothing there right now, okay? And so part of this feasibility study is how are we going to get services there, okay? Do we need to say that you've got to establish, the services would have to be within a certain time frame? Or in that scenario, do we not need to do that because it doesn't really fall into the category of issues that we have right now where we're concerned about getting facilities to serve a property that might be annexing out? I do think that there probably does need to be some outside time frame of how looking at, okay, look, if there's not services there now, when are you going to get them by? And you got to show that you can get them there by X amount of time, otherwise
I'm just saying in that aspect, like if there aren't any there, and it's in the city's hand, and if they have, so where there, it's not like it's going from the commission. I'm not, I don't know much of the law, but if it goes from the municipality, and then it has to be okayed by the commissioners, and so there isn't it just sits in somebody's office because one of them just doesn't want to agree with the other.
Right. So what I think I'm saying is that my preference is, if we're going forward with this, that it doesn't have to be okayed by the Board of County Commissioners. It's just that the municipality reviewing it is held to a standard to approve it, and if they don't follow that standard, somebody else will check.
Let's get somebody else's view, Ron.
I want to, having just been able to look at this right before I got here, I haven't had
Right.
really fully digested, but I want to make sure that we don't have language in there that we can't enforce, so to speak, that we can't bind the municipalities to take certain actions, because this is our charter, meaning the counties, it's not the cities. So we've got to be careful on the framework where if we put in here that the municipalities have to do A or B, I don't know that we can force them to do that unless they would, maybe some amendment to their charter perhaps. So I really want to look at that as you guys analyze it, as what language might lend itself to a burden on the cities that we cannot impose.
And
Randall?
that's their job to write that, because we're not capable of doing that. So I would suggest on the timeline, every other permit that is procured by any municipality has a time limit on it, and it has a renewal extension period on it, whether it's a development order or a building permit or whatever it is. Same concept. We've got to have a sunset time or an extension time if filed in the right time. I don't know what that number is, but if it doesn't move forward, it's over. Got to start over, whether it's 5 years, 3 years, whatever.
Bill? Throw this out here, just for
you all's consideration on the timeline issue. I mean, I think what you're talking about is a vacant property that hasn't come in for its entitlements or any of its development approvals and wants to go ahead and annex, and then how do you deal with that issue on the back end? I mean, one thing that you could consider would be language that ties the development permit process, a comp plan amendment, development order, whatever it might be, to you cannot apply for that until you've submitted the feasibility study, run the water line to the property, entered into an interlocal agreement with the county to do that, or whatever it might be. That's just a thought I would throw out there.
So I have a question about that, though. So once it's no longer within the jurisdiction of the county, how does the charter then give jurisdiction, prohibit the municipality now from issuing a development order?
Well, that's what the charter would be doing. And
I guess my question is, legally, would the charter have the ability to stop the municipality? Right. And I don't think they would. Once they're annexed out, I don't think now we can say, well, you don't get your DO from somebody who we have no jurisdiction over if you haven't done X, Y, and Z. I think the county loses jurisdiction once the requirements for annexation have been met and the annexation vote has been approved. I think
the county has no say at that point.
That's something we can look into. I mean, the annexation statute provides that the charter can provide the only way to do the annexation. So, I mean, it does provide, it was discussed before, well, how do we tell the city that you have to go through this process? Well, we can do that. The statute says we can do that. It's the county charter can provide what the process is for a voluntary annexation to take place. The development, sorry, go ahead.
Brian, go ahead.
Is what you're talking about as precursors to that annexation vote, things that have to occur beforehand is what you're looking at, as opposed to post-annexation, which is what I don't think you can control.
Well, the development permit issue that I brought up would be post-annexation, but yeah, that's something.
My concern is that I don't know how you can bind the cities to any particular action, approval, disapproval, review time, anything at that point, because the county no longer has jurisdiction over that property.
Well, it's a legal issue we could look into. I mean, the way you wrote it, the county continues to have legal standing, to challenge it, but we can look into that, but I understand where you're coming from.
I think that's why you don't want to take away county commission's ability to vote. You do this feasibility study and the municipality says, hey, yeah, I want it, and it's done. No, I think that's where you have to get the county commission involved. I think was what Cecil's whole thing was. The county commission needs to have the ability to say, no, this hurts us. Even though you got this feasibility study and the city, whoever loved it, still it does impact the county.
Any final thoughts from anybody? Joe and Andrea, are we getting the answers that you guys think we need for the next meeting?
Joe, do you need any more other questions?
Say yes.
No.
Yeah, well, we have cookies to eat, though. We're going to be here for a while.
Do you have
Joe?
any other questions?
I guess just being the one that I'm probably going to take the next stab at this, right? Some of the things that I've heard was, I think it was Randy said, all of the details should be worked out before the annexation takes place, which kind of gets to the issue that we just talked about. So, I mean, for me, that's really one of the big outstanding issues. If the direction is to work off the draft that Richard put together, is how to deal with that and kind of the timeline thing. I know one of the previous discussions at the last meeting was the interlocal agreement process. That's kind of worked into this draft. It seems to be, well, the interlocal agreement is an option if services aren't available. But if not, then you have to provide the feasibility study, and the county commission or the city has to approve it based on competent substantial evidence. I mean, is there any discussion about working the interlocal agreement process into this? Does that make more sense? I mean, you drafted it, so I'll go back.
Yeah, so, Richard, thank you. So I could see, as we've talked it through, that there would be maybe a way to write in here that in a scenario where services are already provided to the property, but provided by either a special district or the county, that prior to annexation, instead of or in lieu of the feasibility study, you have to enter into an interlocal agreement as to how those services are going to continue to be provided going forward. And the interlocal would have to be between, I think, the county or the municipality. I mean, because in that scenario, they're already there, but now you got to figure out, got to provide for them to go forward ahead of time. You see what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying, and that actually raises another question for me. So, the way that this is drafted, we're really focusing on the water and sewer, and when you just talked about the interlocal process, I mean, could involve fire and different things, and that's not really included in this. So I want to make sure that we understand, our office understands which direction to go with.
Which could include, but not limited to. Could.
So, I mean, look, I think the term special district, and I don't have the statute in front of me. My recollection is the term special district includes anybody who provides water, fire. I mean, a special district created for any of those purposes, right? So I think if you were to use the term special district when you talked about the interlocals, it would be all encompassing, potentially. I mean, if the fire districts are a concern, which I know we've heard some concern that they are, then they can be part of the interlocal discussion as well. I'm not against it, but I don't know what it looks like at this point in time, if that makes sense.
I think what you're saying is that it should address, the analysis should address the fiscal impacts to all the various service providers that might have the requirement or ability to service that property. How do you take care of the lost revenue over here that might occur?
I think you said it better than I could.
Did you write that down?
Yeah.
No.
But,
okay.
Right, I know.
And how does the practicality of an annexation come into play in all of this? That's another element that I don't know we've totally addressed.
Right. I mean, back to the way that it's currently drafted is practicality. Does it go to the Board of County Commissioners? Does it go by the city? That's something that you all need to tell us. So.
I think they'll tell us in the next meeting how
Yeah.
they want to finally, once we draft it out a little bit more, at the next meeting.
I want to make sure that we leave Andrea and Joe tonight with enough so that Joe can draft.
And one other thing I want to say, because when you talk about the practicality is, look, as just for the benefit of others, like, so if you go through a process where you want to rezone a piece of property in any municipality in this area, and I would assume anywhere in the state, you've got to get letters of availability showing that you've got the ability to get electricity, water, sewer, fire service, EMS, police, all that, and you've got to provide that as part of your application, right? I think that the feasibility study largely is a lot of that. It's, hey, here's the letter from FPL saying they can provide me and will provide me. I don't think it's that burdensome, which is why while I raise that issue, I don't think it becomes too overly burdensome to make it that a private property owner can't do it. So I don't know if that really comes down to the feasibility question that you said, but I mean, I think a lot of this is, here's a letter of availability, and it provides that they either currently serve the property and they will continue to, or they don't yet, and here's when they will, or here's what needs to be done, those types of steps. I mean, I think it's done in pretty much every development order, rezoning process that goes on now.
Anybody else have any comments, thoughts? No? Joe, do you have what you want and need?
I'll take a shot.
Andrea?
He'll take a shot.
He'll take a shot.
Yes, I think we do.
We do. All right, any final comments by anybody? All right, so the next...
Wait, I think...
We're on.
One thought, and this may be not quite on point, but aren't this utility providers, primarily sewer and water, franchise area that the Public Service Commission has to approve? They're not just willy-nilly where the city decides, okay, that's going to be my area, the county says that's going to be my area. Those are pretty set, and there's a process to alter those. Is that correct?
I don't think the Public Service Commission...
Who sets those franchise areas? Because otherwise, the county could at any point, or the city for that matter, the cities could say, all right, I'm going to service that area out there. I'm going to put it in my franchise area, and I'm going to go service it. I just can't see that happening.
It doesn't happen willy-nilly? Yeah. I'm not sure that the Public Service Commission...
So like water sewer service area?
But they can expand it where there's not any, but can they go expand it over the city of Fort Myers, for instance?
Oh, I don't think so.
I don't think so, but I think they can where there's not services.
So
Yeah. Well, that's okay then.
I was just thinking in reverse. If Lee County Utilities has it now, and you move into the city, how does the city connect to those pipes to become the service provider, or do they have to?
We'll find the answer for
I
you.
don't think they do. I think you just pay Lee County
Do you
Utilities.
still pay Lee County Utilities
I would
in the
think so,
city?
because that's kind of a commandeering someone else's facilities.
City can't.
No, that's what the agreement's got to be about.
Yeah.
We'll have somebody answer your questions for you.
Yeah, thank you.
Final comments? All right, next meeting is December 12th at 5 o'clock here. And have you sent this out yet, or do we know?
There is one place that's absolutely not available, so we will have to redo this.
But the dates are okay?
The dates.
Here's the latest.
Oh, okay, cool. Oh, see, there are the.
Are we going to pass this out
We can pass
tonight?
that out,
Yeah.
sure.
All right, so we're going to pass out the proposed dates for the 2024 meeting for the public hearings.
Outside locations, outside of
locations,
downtown.
For the public hearings.
So if you'll note your calendars for those, please. In the meantime, between now and then, any further thoughts, ideas, suggestions, you all have Joe and Andrea's email. If you would email them so that Joe can get something to us a day or two before our meeting, so we'll have a chance to review it.
Okay, so we'll get like a draft or something before next meeting.
Yes.
Yes. Anything further? I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
We're done.